Hi everyone. I'm Marco, and I never thought a routine family gathering could turn into something that would leave me questioning how I ever tolerated this family. My name's Marco, and honestly, I've had my fair share of family drama, but nothing in my 24 years could have prepared me for what happened last weekend. It started innocently enough, or as innocent as a Sunday family brunch can be with my dad, uncle, and cousin involved. I had been dealing with this nagging pain in my side for a few weeks, nothing I thought was serious, mostly just discomfort after long shifts at work. My mom had been gone for a while, long story, but my dad insisted I come to this brunch at my uncle's place because apparently, family appearances mattered more than my well-being. From the moment I stepped in, the tension was palpable. My cousin Ezra, he's in his early 30s but still acts like he's 12 when it comes to mocking me, was already there, leaning against the counter smirking like he knew some inside joke I wasn't part of. My dad was in his usual high-control mode, inspecting everyone's plate, making little comments under his breath. And of course, my uncle, a man who seems to find delight in passive-aggressively criticizing anyone younger than him, was quietly observing, waiting for his cue to speak. I was trying to make it through the meal, ignoring the sharp twinge in my side that had become worse in the last hour. When I bent down to pick up a napkin that fell, the pain hit me like a hammer. I fell to the floor, clutching my side. "Get up, Marco. You're embarrassing yourself," my dad barked. His voice wasn't just loud. It was sharp, cutting through every instinct I had to explain myself. Ezra snickered, loud enough for half the room to turn and look. "Wow, still being overly sensitive, huh? Maybe you just need to toughen up like the rest of us." I couldn't even argue. Every breath felt like I was stabbing myself with a knife. I tried to say something, but my voice came out strangled and weak. My uncle finally spoke, though in his usual calm, almost sinister way. "Marco, maybe you should stop exaggerating. It's Sunday. No one wants to deal with your theatrics right now." I felt a flush of shame and anger, the kind that starts in your chest and makes your hands shake. I had always been careful not to let them see how much their words hurt me. But this time, there was no escaping it. Every eye in the room was on me, and the subtle smirks, the judgment, the satisfaction in their faces, it was suffocating. Somehow, despite the pain, I managed to shuffle over to the couch, trying to make myself small, hoping they'd just ignore me. But they didn't. Every passing minute felt like a test of my endurance, not just physically, but emotionally. My dad hovered nearby, muttering about responsibility, about how I was making everything about me, about how weak I was. Ezra kept snickering, pointing out that maybe this was karma for whatever reason he'd conjured in his mind. I finally managed to convince my dad to let me go to the doctor. I wasn't exaggerating. I needed help. The drive there was quiet, except for Ezra texting my dad nonstop, probably narrating my every groan. When we arrived, I was admitted for scans. I tried to stay composed, hoping that if the results were minor, this whole embarrassing ordeal would finally end. But something about the way the doctor looked when he returned, holding the scan results in his hands, made my stomach drop in a way nothing else had. My dad noticed immediately and stiffened. Ezra leaned forward, still smirking, thinking this was some new opportunity to mock me. The doctor cleared his throat, glancing between my dad and me, and for the first time, everyone's smirks vanished. Silence fell, the kind of silence that presses on your chest and makes you aware of every single heartbeat. I could see my dad's jaw tighten, my uncle's eyes narrowing, and Ezra, well, he was frozen in confusion, the kind of frozen that comes when the joke is suddenly not funny. And that's where it stopped. That's where everything changed, though I didn't know it yet. The doctor opened his mouth, and the words that came out would shift everything I thought I knew about my family and my own place in it. The doctor's voice was calm, almost clinical, but it carried weight. "Marco, the scans show something significant. You have a condition that requires immediate attention and careful management." For a moment, the words didn't fully register. My side still throbbed, but now a different kind of ache took hold, the one born of disbelief and fear. My dad's reaction was the first thing I registered after the initial shock. His posture, normally so rigid and controlled, seemed to falter. His hand gripped the edge of the chair, knuckles white. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came. Ezra was the second to react, and his reaction was almost worse in its way. The smirk that had defined his entire persona vanished completely, replaced with a bewildered, uncertain expression. He was clearly used to everyone cowering to his teasing, and this was uncharted territory. My uncle, who had been quiet the entire morning, now leaned forward. His usual calm had a new edge, something predatory. Immediate attention, he repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. Do they mean serious? I could barely nod, still clutching my side, still trying to process everything. The pain had shifted from sharp to dull, a constant reminder that this wasn't minor. This wasn't something I could push through with sheer willpower like they seemed to expect. The doctor, sensing the tension, added, "We need to discuss treatment options and potentially surgery. It's serious enough that delaying care could be dangerous." That's when my dad's voice broke the silence, sharp, tense, and unlike anything I'd heard before. "Why wasn't this caught sooner? You've been complaining for weeks," and he cut himself off, as if he realized the words could be used against him. His eyes, usually so cold, were flickering with something I couldn't name. Shame? Guilt? Maybe both. Ezra's voice, trembling slightly despite his best attempt to act casual, broke in. "Wait, so you've been faking all this, Dad?" He shot me a pointed look, and my stomach sank. He still hadn't fully grasped the seriousness, and worse, he was trying to twist it into some performance. I couldn't even respond. Every attempt to explain was drowned out by their disbelief, their reflexive need to undermine me. The doctor, noticing the tension, cleared his throat. "Marco, I know this is difficult, but right now we need to focus on your care." We left the clinic in a daze. My dad drove, silence stretching between us like a thin wire. Ezra sat in the back, fidgeting with his phone, occasionally glancing over his shoulder at me. I knew exactly what he was thinking. How could this happen to someone so weak? How could the thing he had mocked for weeks suddenly be real? At home, things only escalated. The moment we walked in, my uncle was already there, lounging on the couch like he had all the authority in the world. "So," he said, voice dripping with condescension, "what does this mean? Are we talking hospital visits? Time off work? More excuses?" I felt my chest tighten. I wasn't used to being treated like I had done something wrong for being sick, but that was my family for you. Ezra's smirk had returned, quieter this time, but still present. "Yeah, Marco," he said, leaning back lazily. "Don't think we'll be bending our schedules for you. We all have things to do." I gritted my teeth. It wasn't just frustration, it was disbelief at how predictable they were, even in the face of something serious. My dad finally spoke, his voice controlled but sharp. "We're going to figure out how to handle this, but you need to be reasonable. We can't just be reasonable." I interrupted, my voice stronger than I thought possible. "I've been in pain for weeks. You've both been standing there criticizing me, mocking me, and now that this is serious, you act like I'm the one being difficult?" My dad's eyes narrowed, and I could see the familiar shift, the defensive armor going up. My uncle leaned forward, like a predator circling, his eyes calculating. Ezra stayed back, arms crossed, the corners of his mouth twitching as if he couldn't decide whether to be angry or embarrassed. The next few days were unbearable. My father insisted on managing my appointments, calling each specialist, and trying to schedule around his own availability, as if my illness were a minor inconvenience in his world. My uncle showed up at the house daily, offering unsolicited advice and making pointed comments about my work ethic, my posture, my diet, anything that could be twisted into evidence that I was somehow responsible for my own condition. Ezra took a different approach, spending hours online researching minor symptoms and sending me links with captions like, "Seems like overreacting, doesn't it?" Or, "Don't tell me this is your big medical crisis." It was subtle, but every message stung, reminding me how little any of them truly cared. But the worst was at family gatherings. Even when I was clearly in pain, they treated me like a spectacle. At dinner, my dad would sigh loudly if I had to sit down or leave the table early. Ezra would lean over, whispering to his friends about how dramatic I was being. My uncle would make passing comments about how sickness can be exaggerated if you lack discipline. It was relentless, and every day it felt like they were trying to prove that my suffering was entertainment for them. And yet, despite all of this, something inside me began to shift. The anger, the humiliation, the constant undermining. It was slowly turning into something else. Something cold, something deliberate. I realized that if I let them continue like this, nothing would change. They had been treating me this way my entire life. But now Now that the world had delivered undeniable proof that I wasn't just overly sensitive, I had leverage. I started keeping records, every comment, every snicker, every sneer. I documented every appointment, every interaction. The more I did it, the more I could see just how deep their entitlement ran. They weren't just rude or mean. They were actively trying to control me, even over something as serious as my health. Then came the moment that made me realize this wasn't just about my illness. Ezra, smug as ever, suggested that I owe them something. He casually mentioned that all the stress I had caused, missing family obligations, needing attention, disrupting their plans, was somehow a debt I needed to pay. My dad didn't even blink. They were acting as if the tables hadn't turned at all. And that's when I knew I had to do more than just survive this. I had to plan, carefully, deliberately. I had to make them see that their cruelty had consequences, and I had the means now. The pieces were starting to fall into place. But I wasn't ready yet. The plan was forming, but the execution would require patience, subtlety, and restraint. If I acted too soon, I'd lose the advantage. And these people, cunning as they were, would exploit any weakness. That night, I lay in bed, pain flaring in my side, but my mind sharper than ever. I could hear Ezra laughing downstairs, my dad humming as if nothing had changed, my uncle moving around with that air of superiority. Every sound fueled the fire growing in me. The next few weeks were complicated, to say the least. My treatment required regular checkups, some medications, and a cautious approach to activity. But for my family, this was not a time to be compassionate. It was a time to assert dominance, remind me of my place, and show the world that Marco was still, in their eyes, incapable. At first, I tried to maintain the fragile peace. I answered questions politely, went along with the unsolicited advice, and smiled through the mockery. But behind that smile, everything was being recorded, mentally, in writing, and sometimes literally. Every comment my dad made about exaggeration, every snicker from Ezra, every sly remark from my uncle, I cataloged them. I had a plan, and every cruel word they spoke became a piece of ammunition. Ezra's arrogance became my first target, simply because he was the easiest to predict. He loved showing off, loved looking clever in front of others. So I began dropping hints about minor financial investments I had been making, completely fictional, just enough to spark his curiosity. I knew that the more he tried to show off or get involved, the more reckless he would become. One Saturday, Ezra barged into my apartment unannounced, holding his phone like it was a weapon. "Marco, I heard you've been investing in something," he said, voice dripping with fake casualness. "What's the deal? You trying to show off?" I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, letting him stew. "Maybe. Why? Are you worried you'll miss out?" He snorted, clearly offended that I might be doing something he wasn't in control of. "I'm just making sure you don't ruin yourself. You're not exactly known for making smart choices." And there it was, bait taken. I smiled innocently. "Don't worry, Ezra. Everything is perfectly legal. I wouldn't want you to get the wrong idea and start panicking." He left that day muttering to himself, the first little crack in his smug facade. I made sure to keep him invested in this imaginary venture, dropping hints in phone calls, casual texts, and conversations that could easily be overheard. Every reaction he had, from excitement to subtle envy, I noted. This was the kind of slow burn I thrived on. My dad was slightly trickier. His obsession with appearances, control, and respect made him both dangerous and predictable. I knew I couldn't attack him directly. Not yet. Instead, I started subtly questioning his narratives, making him over-explain things to guests, coaxing him into situations where his arrogance would backfire. For example, during one dinner, he made a comment about how he always knew what was best for me, how my illness was just a minor setback. I nodded politely, then asked, quietly enough for only him to hear, "I've been thinking about what you said last week about my work ethic. Can you walk me through exactly how you define responsibility? I want to make sure I understand your expectations clearly." He froze, blinking. He had no script prepared. Everyone else at the table waited. I stayed calm, letting the silence grow until he stammered through a long, rambling explanation. By the end, he was flustered, sweating slightly, and I could see Ezra trying desperately to hide his amusement. That evening, my uncle commented casually, "Dad seems a little off today. Did Marco do something?" I smiled internally. Small victories, but they mattered. The uncle was, in many ways, the most dangerous. He didn't just mock or dismiss. He manipulated and undermined, always positioning himself as the voice of reason while quietly sowing tension. I had to be careful. I started subtly documenting his interventions, noting every time he tried to twist a conversation, question my choices, or put me down in front of others. That documentation would be invaluable later, especially when combined with Ezra's slip-ups and my dad's increasingly frustrated reactions. The real breakthrough came one evening when I realized how easily they underestimated me. My dad had invited family over for a casual Sunday gathering, just the three of them, plus a few distant relatives. He thought it would be a chance to assert control, to show me how out of my depth I really was. I played along, pretending to be weak, tired, compliant. I sat quietly on the couch while Ezra leaned over, whispering cruel little comments that he thought no one else would hear. My uncle made pointed remarks about my lack of ambition, while my dad lectured me on the importance of appearances. Everything was proceeding exactly as I expected. Then, I slipped in a subtle but calculated comment about the imaginary investment I had been nurturing. I mentioned casually, I might need to move some assets around next week. I wouldn't want to miss a good opportunity. The effect was instantaneous. Ezra's eyes lit up with excitement. He leaned forward eagerly. Wait, you're serious? What kind of assets? Stocks? Real estate? I shrugged, just enough to seem casual. A little bit of both. Nothing too big yet. My dad immediately perked up, frowning. Marco, are you talking about managing money without guidance? That's risky. We should discuss this before you make any decisions. And there it was, the first visible crack. My uncle, ever the opportunist, jumped in with the same tone of advice, all the while trying to maintain that smug aura of superiority. They were both now emotionally invested in something I had completely fabricated, and the beauty of it was that every reaction they had fed into my plan. I spent the next few days building on that momentum. Every small comment they made, every eager question, I amplified, nudging them to interfere more and more. Ezra started offering unsolicited tips, completely irrelevant but full of confidence, while my dad began micromanaging schedules, trying to assert control over something that didn't exist. My uncle started subtly correcting me, offering advice on how to handle a situation I had made up over and over again. It was fascinating to watch. They were all so convinced that they were in control, so certain that I was the weak link, that they didn't see the trap being laid in plain sight. And I knew that when the right moment came, all of their arrogance, all of their mockery, and all of their entitlement would explode in a way they never expected. The pivotal moment arrived sooner than I thought. My dad, frustrated and flustered, had accidentally shared sensitive information with a distant relative during a phone call, information about a decision that needed to be made regarding my fictional investments. Ezra overheard, naturally, and immediately interpreted it as some kind of secret tip meant for him. My uncle, seeing the chaos, jumped in with his own assumptions, trying to correct everyone. The scene that unfolded was spectacular. Arguments, conflicting advice, and over-the-top reactions. All in the span of a single afternoon, my family's entitlement, arrogance, and cruelty collided with the trap I had carefully constructed. And I watched from the sidelines, pretending to be exhausted and overwhelmed, knowing that the real control had quietly shifted to me. By the end of the day, they were in disarray. My dad was red-faced and muttering under his breath. Ezra was pacing, muttering numbers and strategies as if the whole situation was a crisis, and my uncle had retreated to his corner, fuming but unsure how to assert authority in the chaos he had helped create. The day of the family gathering arrived, and I could feel the tension even before they walked through the door. My dad was fidgeting with his tie, obviously anxious. Ezra was practically vibrating with impatience, checking his phone every few seconds as if he couldn't wait to prove he was the clever one in this scenario. My uncle, true to form, strolled in with an air of superiority, as if he had orchestrated the entire world and was now overseeing its inevitable order. I greeted them with a calm smile, pretending to be weak, exhausted, and just grateful for their presence. They all relaxed, certain that I was still the powerless Marco they had been mocking for years. That was the beauty of it. The first act was simple. I led them into the living room, where I had arranged a casual discussion setup, a small table with printed documents, charts, and notes. Everything was meticulously crafted to look legitimate: my investments, my progress reports, all the subtle details I had built up over weeks. I had even created fake emails and screenshots from imaginary advisors. They crowded around, eager to inspect, to critique, to assert dominance. Ezra was the first to lean over, peering at the documents like a hawk. "Wait, you actually did all this?" His voice was a mixture of disbelief and excitement. "Of course," I said quietly. "I've been managing it carefully, but I thought you might want to see how it's going." My dad immediately jumped in, trying to assert control. "Marco, I don't think." "Dad?" I interrupted gently, almost apologetically. "I really appreciate your concern, but this is something I've been handling. I wanted to share it with you so you can understand." The look on his face when he realized I was fully in control was priceless. It was the same expression you see in people who have spent decades thinking they're untouchable, only to find out the rules suddenly changed. Then came Ezra. He leaned over the table, flipping through the documents. "Wait, these numbers, they're huge. Marco, are you serious? How did you even?" I let the pause linger. Let the weight of it settle in. "I told you I've been careful. Everything is real. I've been working quietly, steadily, exactly as I needed to." Ezra's smugness evaporated completely. His attempts to act superior faltered, replaced by a mix of envy, disbelief, and frustration. He looked at my dad, as if searching for support. My dad's jaw was tight, hands clenching the table edge. The control he prided himself on had slipped from his grasp. Then I moved on to my uncle. "Uncle James," I said, deliberately using his full name. "You've given me a lot of advice over the years, haven't you? About responsibility, about planning, about taking control of my life." He straightened, ready to reply, his tone already defensive. "Well," I continued, "I hope you can appreciate that your advice finally paid off. Everything you told me, I've applied. Every principle, every cautionary tale, I followed carefully. And it worked." The room went silent. My uncle's face shifted from smug superiority to incredulous fury. Ezra was pacing, muttering under his breath, and my dad looked like he was about to explode, realizing that all his lectures, all his control, had been rendered irrelevant. I leaned back, calm, composed, letting them stew. Then I delivered the final blow. "You see," I said, voice quiet but clear, "all this time, while you were mocking me, doubting me, and trying to control me, I was preparing. Every comment you made, every insult, every snicker, it all went into shaping exactly how I would handle this. And here we are." Ezra stopped pacing and looked at me, eyes wide. You actually did it?" I nodded. "Yes. And now, you can see clearly, your attempts to control me, to diminish me, only taught me how to succeed on my own terms. I didn't just survive your arrogance. I turned it into a strategy." My dad's face was ashen. He opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing no lecture, no threat, could undo what had happened. My uncle's fingers drummed on the table, furious but impotent, and Ezra slumped back into a chair, defeated, his confidence shattered. For the first time in my life, I felt the satisfaction of complete control over a situation they had always dominated. They were villains, all of them, entitled, cruel, and incapable of seeing beyond their own egos. And now, for the first time, they had no leverage. The rest of the afternoon was anticlimactic in its own way. They stayed for a short while, making awkward attempts to regain composure, but it was clear the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. I managed the conversation, steering it entirely on my terms. Every question, every comment, I deflected or redirected. They couldn't manipulate me anymore, and the humiliation of their previous behavior hung heavily in the room. By the time they left, I had a sense of closure I had never felt before. My dad was silent the entire drive home, Ezra sulking, and my uncle muttering under his breath, clearly plotting, but powerless. I didn't care. I had documented everything, turned their arrogance and cruelty into my advantage, and emerged unscathed. More than that, stronger. I spent the evening alone, reflecting. The pain in my side had lessened, but the real ache had been the years of their contempt. That ache was gone. The control they thought they had, gone. My revenge was complete, not through shouting or confrontation, but through patience, strategy, and careful observation. And now, for the first time, my family had to reckon with something they never expected. Marco was no longer the powerless one. The house was quiet. The victory was mine. And I realized, finally, that sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't dramatic. It's methodical. It's watching people who have spent years treating you as insignificant come face to face with your success and having nothing left to throw at you. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.